Hello, it's Kira here to react for you to learn about a brief history of the Russian squat. Okay, so admittedly, I don't know if any of you know this about me. I don't know why you would. I am a personal trainer by trade. So when I'm not doing this and when I'm not hanging out with my daughter, oh, my hair is a disaster. And I'm not hanging out with my daughter, I own and I'm also a little drippy and sick today, so apologies. I own a personal training company, and I am an incredible squatter. I can sit squat. I wonder if I can show my sit squat here on this. This seat is like a twisty, turny seat, right? So it rolls and it twists, right? But I don't think that you'd be able to see me squat down on the floor here. So I'm going to try it here dangerously. It'll make for a good video though, right? So just coming up, right? And then just squatting down, right? So I can do a sit squat. Whoa. Oh, I'm attached by the headphones. Okay, so I can't actually stand up. So I can sit squat here. It is a proud little talent of mine. And that was a little scary. And I love squatting because, again, I'm a trainer. So I train on squatting. It's one of my specialties. And so, of course, when I'm choosing videos for what I want to learn about, this one came up and I was like, yes, please. So here we are. We are going to learn about a brief history, pardon me, of Russian squat because shockingly, I do not know about this. Dude, my hair. This is by Setarko. And so it is time for me, as the title of this channel would suggest, to get my learn on, right? So let's go ahead and make that big and make that big, and let's hit it.
Greetings, comrades. Today, Slav squat is one of the most prominent things that characterizes Russians on the internet.
By the way, sit squatting is not hard. Like, when you can do it, it's not tiring, right? It's very, it's a great way to chill, honestly. And it's so helpful if you want to sit down, but you don't want to sit down on the ground.
Along with Adidas tracksuits, gopniks, hard bass, vodka, and all of that combined. There are many explanations online for where this tradition came from, but most of them are either humorous like "We Russians don't want to sit on the dirty ground," or
duh,
are close to the truth but do not elaborate too much on the matter. So, squatting in Russia. How, where from, and why.
I feel like I should watch this whole video in a sit squat. If this seat didn't feel so dangerous to do that, I would.
First of all, let's be serious. Squatting Slav is more of a meme than a truth. Yes, sometimes you can see young people in Adidas suits squatting on the streets of Russian cities, but next to them you'll see hundreds of other people sitting well, normally. So treat it as a meme. A rather hackneyed meme, by the way. And this meme is directly related to such a concept as gopnik. So let's talk about them for a little bit.
Okay.
So who is a gopnik?
I was gonna say, I don't even know what that is, so please, please, please don't assume I do.
No, not every single guy in a tracksuit can be a gopnik.
Okay.
In fact, there is a theory that the word was born in Russia even before the revolution of 1917, derived from the name of the City Welfare Society in St. Petersburg. Many vagabonds who were engaged in petty theft lived there. It was these people who first became known as gopniks.
Okay.
There is also the old slang word gop-stop, which is basically street robbery. And it is this activity that separates the real canonical gopniks from simple fans of tracksuits and sunflower seeds. In fact, the robbery can be done even without violence. And this is actually the highest skill of gopniks. The ability to use the fears and insecurities of their target, which they would call loch, to force him to voluntarily give up money or valuable items and remain convinced that this is the best way out for him. This phenomenon existed both in the USSR and in modern Russia, and only in recent years this began to die out somewhat. So gradually the word gopnik began to be associated not only with street robbers, the concept itself has expanded. Today, this word in Russian implies a certain style of dress, a low cultural level, rejection of human values, and even a love for certain things. In fact, the main distinguishing features of the gopnik in modern Russia are the fact that he recognizes the right of the strong, is characterized by increased intolerance to everything and aggression towards everyone around him. And he doesn't even have to break the law to be called a gopnik nowadays.
Okay.
Can gopniks be considered a subculture like emo?
That's exactly what I was thinking. I was like, okay, like in the States we have hipsters, right? They're not, gopniks, but emo, hippies, yuppies. There's one other one. They're really like dirty people who like kind of travel around. They always have dogs. I can't remember what they're called. Anyway, so yeah, something like that.
Partly. Of course, they don't have a clear value system, ideas and philosophy. They don't protest against anything in particular and don't want to achieve anything. Hell.
So I've been toying with this idea of achievement and whether or not it's really all that valuable of a thing. I've always been a high achiever in life, right? And I'm really getting tired of it. I really don't want to do anything anymore. I don't want to do anything anymore. I don't care. Maybe I'm going to turn into a gopnik. I can sit squat. I love tracksuits. I own many. I mean, y'all. Oh, man.
Their main desire is to drink some beer and break someone's face. But they do have a fairly clear identity, which is already firmly established in folklore. It should be noted that the USSR gopniks, the gopniks of the 90s and the gopniks of today are completely different people, primarily in terms of their numbers and danger. The Soviet gopniks were a relatively small number of street robbers, while the gopniks of the 90s were really dangerous guys, often low-ranking members of organized crime gangs.
I feel like the 90s in general was kind of a violent, like, massive criminal activity time, maybe internationally.
Don't forget that living according to criminal traditions was considered the absolute norm among young people back then. Today's gopniks are an almost extinct species, resembling the canonical gopniks only by their lack of education and aggressiveness. So why am I telling you all this? What squatting and gopniks in all of their manifestations have in common? Well, it's all quite simple. Both the gopniks of the USSR and the more so the gopniks of Russia have always lived or pretended to by some unwritten code of rules, by the prison laws. There was a special thieves' code that existed, and in some places it still exists.
Yeah, the only thing with me is like I wouldn't rob people. I'm not aggressive really at all. I mean, I live in Chicago and I'm part of a wrestling league, but that's kind of different, right? I would maybe I am aggressive. There are parts, okay, I'll take that back, but I wouldn't, harass somebody on the street, right? It's just not my style. But everything else sounds, I think I could be a gopnik. Drinking. I love smoking. I don't do it anymore. I quit back in way a long time ago. But man, if it wasn't going to give me an early death and a horrible, quality of life, I would keep doing that.
As a way of transposing the values and rules of the life in prison to the life on the outside. Accordingly, not only the rules were carried over to the free world, but also many of the habits that prisoners had developed over the years in prison. And even those who had never been in prison themselves, but wanted to live according to thieves' principles, tried to adopt these habits of their senior comrades. I think you have already guessed where I'm going. One of the most common versions of the origins of Slav squatting is precisely the prison one. For example, in Soviet Russia it was easy to tell if a person ever was in prison. Such a man could easily squat for hours.
I can squat
Why
forever.
was this skill so important in prison?
I've never been to prison,
Some Soviet
and a
prison
Russian
rules
prison at
stated
that.
prisoners could only lie or sit on their beds after the lights are out. During the day, prisoners had to stand up or sit on the floor. This harsh rule comes from pre-revolutionary times, for example from St. Petersburg's famous Kristy prison, where a prisoner's bed had to be raised at the beginning of the day and lowered only at night, to keep prisoners awake throughout the day. By the way, nowadays such strict rules are applied only in high-security prisons.
Shocker. Prison sucks.
For lifelong prisoners. The stone floors were unbearably cold, and sitting on the floor was considered indecent and humiliating among Russian prisoners. Personal hygiene in prisons has always been a very important thing. So the only solution was to squat.
Yeah.
In fact, this was the only way for most prisoners to sit. There were also no benches in the courtyards, where they had about half an hour of free time each day. This habit was used by the prison guards as well. They often forced prisoners to squat, for example when transferring them from one body to another, because A. It is easier to count heads when people were sitting like that,
Okay.
and B. It is difficult to rise quickly and attack the guards from the squatting position. Therefore,
I mean,
squatting.
You can rise quickly, but once you're in a squat for an elongated period of time, it's just like any other, like getting up from a sofa, right? Getting up from a chair. You know, your body is it's not ready to like thrust up into action, right?
During various inspections, examinations, walks, and even just in their cells, all the time. And this skill became popular not only among prisoners, but also among the criminalized youth of the USSR and Russia, mostly for the same reasons. The places where young gopniks could gather and fight, smoke and drink usually had no benches. Such famous places as behind garages, near heating pipes and so on. Therefore,
sounds like my teen years.
That's how the squatting gopniks were born.
I grew up in Iowa for the most part. We moved around when I was very young, but you know, when I was junior high and high school. Yeah, and we'd actually go to the woods a lot because there were a lot of woods around where I was. But yeah, behind garages, that was also definitely a thing.
They learned from their prison teachers. Plus, it was really convenient. However,
and drink and smoke.
Not the only
finish that thought.
Of such a tradition. There are at least 3 other versions: Army version, Miners version, and Asian version. The Army version is somewhat similar to the prison version. For young guys in the army, squatting between difficult assignments was almost the only way to take a break. And if you consider that in the USSR the army was compulsory for all men and that you had to serve for 2 years, it was hard to give up this habit when you were released. It was the same with the miners. In the coal-rich mines, the mine faces are usually very narrow, so squatting is virtually the only way for the miners to spend time in the mine. And this habit carried over to the off hours as well. So in regions where the proportion of the population working in the mines was high, such as Donbass, this influence cannot be ruled out. There is also a version of Asian influence. For example, if you have ever been to Southeast Asia, you may have noticed that this pose is extremely popular there, much more so than in Russia actually. Russia has always had strong ties with Asia, so perhaps the Russians learned this pose from the Asians too. And in general, doctors say that squatting is good for your health.
Yeah.
This position requires the muscles to maintain a light level of tension, which helps your body to remain toned. Squatting stretches
and it keeps the blood flow going
and massages the glutes, hamstrings.
I think it feels so good on the low back. It's like the thing I want to do after I run a long distance. Like especially half marathons and marathons. Like I'm just like, oh my God, get me in a squat. Squat it down. And it's great because you don't have to have a chair or anything. You can finish the marathon and just get into a squat and just fucking rest. It's awesome.
And calves, and helps to maintain mobility of the hip joints. So if you spend your day sitting in the office, get up, take a couple of short walks, put on your tracksuit, and do some slow squatting. It's for your own good.
Oh, I love it. Is this the right one? Yes, it is. Boom. All right, that video was everything I hoped it would be and more. I learned so much about Gopniks and about why we see the Russian culture and squatting as such a common thing, because you really don't see it here. And when I do a squat, when I sit down into a squat, people are like, whoa, or it's like an anomaly, right? There's actually a hilarious picture of me. I'm an activist and protester and stuff. And so it was after an action we had done, and I'm downtown and everybody's eating and there are people on the bench and I'm just sitting and squatting. It really is extremely comfortable way to sit. So thank you, Russia, for that lovely way of taking a load off. All right. So that's all I got for you today. I hope you enjoyed that video as much as I did. And, be sure to like, share, and subscribe to these videos, and whatever works with the English there. And we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.